Why hasn't the internet killed Australian television yet?
And have standalone GPS devices lost their sense of direction? Welcome to Vertical Hole, the tech show where we channel surf through the headlines in search of the big picture. I'm Alex Kidman, and this is the man with pure silicon in his veins, Adam Turner. Adam, what's new in tech?
The Internet Archive has set its sights on preserving games consoles and their titles, setting up the new console living room section of archive.org. Emulated consoles include the Atari 2600, giving a new lease of life to classic games such as River Raid, Pac-Man and Pitfall.
Revelations about the US National Security Agency's spying efforts have strongly suggested that they've been intercepting tech packages so that they can install backdoor software onto them. Affected products have covered everything from hard drives to routers and modems. At this stage, it's probably safe to assume that unless you happen to be computing by abacus, somebody somewhere is probably watching you.
Internet shopping continues to go from strength to strength in Australia, with the number of online purchases growing by 46% in the last 2 years. The good news for Australian retailers is that even online we prefer to shop local, although it's a shame that some major retailers still can't get their act together.
Torrent site Kickass Torrents has released its list of the top searches for 2013, essentially highlighting everything that was being pirated during the calendar year. All the usual suspects are there, big names you might suspect, but the real surprise is that the top search term isn't, for example, Game of Thrones, but is instead the name of a piracy group that releases popular movies. What does it say when your piracy group has a stronger brand than the movies you're actually pirating? Now Adam, you've been having some thoughts about TV viewership figures.
Yeah, it's interesting. A lot of people say that TV's dead and that, maybe throw around the figures like, well, I don't watch TV and my friends don't watch TV, therefore TV must be dead. But when you look at the stats, TV, at least in Australia, is still in pretty good condition. I'll read some stats to you here. Over the last couple of years, the average number of daily viewers has stayed steady at around 13.5 million. The amount of time we spend watching television is steadied around 3 hours a day, and that doesn't count watching movies on DVD or playing consoles or anything like that. That's actually watching broadcast television. And the top rating shows are still bringing in an average of around about 2 million viewers. And the other thing that's interesting is PVR figures as well. More than 90% of television is still watched live, even though more than half of us own PVRs. So despite all the technology and all the options that are still there, the vast majority of people are still sitting down in front of the idiot box and doing what they're told and watching live television. And it's a bit hard to believe when you hear the anecdotal evidence, and I think a lot of it's because people live in their own little bubble, and because it's like, oh, I don't buy CDs anymore, my friends don't buy CDs anymore, therefore CDs are dead or DVDs are dead. They're not. The thing is that these predictions are usually made by the tech-savvy minority who think they're a majority. Now, there are a lot of figures in the US to support that broadcast and traditional cable television there is in a lot of trouble. Here, not so much, and I'm wondering if the broadcasters have been given a bit of a stay of execution, or whether it's they're handling it better, or whether it's because their internet access is so slow that we don't have other options. What do you think, Alex? What's going on there?
Well, look, I mean, I've got to say, anecdotally, and I am speaking anecdotally, I certainly don't watch 3 hours of broadcast TV a day myself.
No, me either.
But I recognise that I'm in a particular group and I've got particular interests, and some of those don't lend themselves to that kind of long form watching. I don't watch a lot of sport, for example, and I can easily see how that could expand those figures out, and I mean happily support TV networks and support advertising and all the things that they actually need to make a profit. I suspect the internet side of it is a big part of it. Whilst Australia ranks quite highly per capita on a lot of piracy figures, that's got to be kind of meted out against the fact that when you blow those figures per capita, you're looking against a fairly small kind of population base, and you're also looking against fairly awful internet speeds. We just keep tumbling down the internet rankings globally, and that doesn't look like it's going to change anytime soon. I guess the other thing is the networks are handling it maybe okay-ish. They're starting to get behind the idea that they can do multi-channel. They're starting to get behind the idea that they can do catch-up TV, although that's still something that really, outside of the ABC, it's still pretty bad.
Yeah, catch-up TV doesn't really impress me generally because the picture quality's not there. I've got a 46-inch television, which these days is, not the biggest, not the smallest, somewhere in the middle, and most catch-up TV services look appalling on it. And it's easier and it looks better to either go and buy it from iTunes or go and steal it from somewhere else. But to watch something like Homeland, the catch-up TV service is just terrible. Again, iView's probably one of the best. My Blu-ray, I've got a Sony Blu-ray player and it's got, I think, 4 different catch-up TV services built into it. But with some of them like Plus 7, half the shows aren't there. Oh, sorry, you need to be using a web browser to watch that. Or sorry, you need to be using a Samsung television to watch that. So they've made it so much of a mess that I think, while a few people say, well, it's easier to just go and steal it, more people at the moment are saying, it's actually just easier to sit down and watch it when you want to show it. But that is going to start to move, and I think they've been given a bit of a stay of execution because the NBN's been scaled down and pushed back a little bit. So I think the writing is on the wall. I think Foxtel's doing a pretty good job of adapting to the new environment. And I think the commercial networks are lagging a bit further behind, but figures like that seem to support that they figure, just shut up and do as you're told because it's working for them. So sadly, I don't think things will change as fast as we hope they will because idiots still watch television. Sorry, people, but if you're going to sit there and let them treat you like an idiot and put up with it, they're going to keep treating you like an idiot. So yeah, after all this time, you could sort of say that PVRs have lost their way in Australia, but they're not the only technology. Alex, you reckon that standalone GPS units have also lost their way?
Well, sort of. I've been doing a lot of testing of standalone GPS, and for that matter, mobile phone GPS recently. So, a lot of hours logged on the road, a lot of testing, a lot of driving, a lot of seeing idiot drivers out on the road staring at GPSs when they shouldn't.
Yes.
I may have been one of them. The big challenge that's hit the GPS market in recent years has, of course, been the smartphone, because 99% of smartphone devices have a GPS chip in them because they're just so dirt cheap to throw into a smartphone these days. And a lot of people go, oh, close enough is good enough. I've got the smartphone, it's on me, it's a device, and either I've got enough data to run Google Maps or Apple Maps or what have you, or I'll pony up for a dedicated GPS app and I'll just hopefully stick it on a mount on my windscreen.
Like a TomTom or a Navigon app or something like that.
Yeah, exactly, just so. Quick reminder, if you are going to use your smartphone, get a windscreen mount. Not only are the fines incalculably horrible, but so is crashing into someone. Here ends the public service announcement. What I've seen recently, though, is I think there is still a certain place for a certain class of GPS device. Now, the GPS manufacturers, of course, want to cover their entire market. So you've got the real low-budget, cheap, entry-level stuff, and you've got the premium stuff. And previously, that used to be a case of, right, well, entry level about $200, premium about $600. That's massively contracted. And as it's done so, and as smartphones have kind of come up from underneath, I reckon it's essentially killed the value proposition for the budget, the real budget GPS devices, because generally they're older tech, they're slower to lock on, they've got much less responsive display screens, which means they're just nowhere near as pleasant to use. And the difference between an entry-level GPS device, about $100, and a premium one at about $200 is marked. It's massive, especially because you've got some vendors who are actually holding off certain features for their standalone devices.
What kind of features? See, for example, I've got the TomTom app on my iPhone, and I'm happy with that because I can't be bothered carrying around another device. What kind of features am I sacrificing though by sticking with the phone rather than buying a standalone unit?
Okay, well, leaving aside the arguments about whether or not your smartphone's going to run out of battery or you're going to get a call or stuff like that, and that does happen, and while I was out and about testing, that happened to me on a number of occasions. But leaving that stuff aside, TomTom's actually a really good example. They have your TomTom app, and I've got the same app, and it has the classic, the standard TomTom interface, standard colours, standard setup. It's the same one they've had for donkey's years. Yeah. They've completely refurbished that, and they now have an almost tablet-like kind of interface, which is very map-centric. It's really quite intelligent. It's very, very well done, actually. The new premium in TomTom devices are amongst my favourites for that kind of class of device. And whilst they've said, yes, we could port this to the smartphone, they're very much deliberately not doing so. They're saying, no, look, this is something we will offer on the standalone devices first. So That's an interface you're missing out on. And when you're talking about a GPS device, again, you're talking about A to B, fast and convenient as possible. A device that is more fast and convenient is going to be more pleasant to use, and you're going to use it more frequently. On crossing vendor lines, you have companies like Navman who have spoken directions that include landmarks, and some of this is quite clever. So whilst almost every single GPS out there will say, turn left into Turner Street, if you're lucky.
Yeah.
Theirs will do, turn left into Turner Street at the KFC. I'm presuming that there is a KFC in the India block.
Yeah, naturally. I wouldn't live there if there wasn't.
Absolutely, yeah. I know you too well. But that kind of thing. Those kind of features are being held into the premium space. And when you look at the cost, for example, of that TomTom app, which whilst it's been on special, still ranges close to the $100 mark most of the time, that's the price of one of those entry-level GPSs with a generally lousy screen, slower lock-on, all these kind of problem areas.
Yeah.
It's not that much of a jump if you're going to use a sat-nav all the time to go for the premium devices. That's where they kind of need to be pushing. But I think they're muddying their entire market by saying, well, we want a little bit of everything. We want the budget devices as well. And the budget devices are just, they're not good enough compared to the smartphone, and they're nowhere near good enough compared to their own premium offerings, and the difference just isn't that great, in my opinion.
Okay, it's love it or hate it time, and today we're talking about the cloud. Of course, when I say the cloud, I mean storing your files on the internet, maybe storing your backups, editing your documents, all those kind of things that you do that aren't on your computer but up there somewhere on someone else's servers. Now, Alex, you're telling me that you hate the cloud. What is it about the cloud that you're not so keen on?
Well, look, the cloud is all wonderful and magical and convenient fairyland when it's working. When it's not, you're completely stuffed. And I'll give you a couple of different examples of this. If you're talking about streaming down music or movies or any other kind of entertainment resource, if your connection is poor, your experience is poor. Your experience is very poor, in fact, because whilst it might be acceptable to maybe have like a radio-style skip or jump in a song for a brief millisecond, if you're only paying micro fractions of a cent to listen to it, that's okay. When you're talking about a movie that you're sitting down to watch with the kids, and suddenly it pauses and just you get a rotating wheel for 5 minutes, that's not such a happy experience. No. And the same is true for any kind of, serious business-related work. Great, when you can collaboratively share a document, but the moment you're kicked out of that loop because your connection's gone down, and let's face it, Australian net connections are really nothing to crow about in most cases, and even within the areas where we do have a little bit of innovation, we've got some reasonable mobile broadband. We've got some reasonable mobile broadband, but the problem is that stuff gets congested. It's complete shared spectrum. So 4G might be great if you're the only person in a small regional town sitting on the 4G cell, but the moment you're sitting at Melbourne Airport, and I've done this, trying to get any kind of data signal, it can say, oh yeah, you've got 5 bars of 4G, you'll do great. But there's nothing there. And when there's nothing there with the cloud, there's absolutely nothing there. It's not the case that the cloud goes away and suddenly it's all sunshine. No, the cloud goes away and you're totally stuffed. And it's even worse in the backup arena, because the idea of having a photo backup, for example, for consumers is a great one. You really should do this, because you might think, well, I've got a hard drive that's got all my backups on it, or I burn a disk regularly that sits in my drawer. Well, that's great, except, when you're out at work and your house burns down, sorry, it's all gone. That is a benefit in theory to the cloud, but the issue, of course, is that Australian upload speeds across everything are just plain painful. And this means that you either set your system to upload for the next 6 weeks to catch up with your photo stream, or you just don't bother. And an awful lot of people just don't bother because it's just too painful.
Well, see, I'm happy to say I love the cloud, but only because I agree with pretty much everything you just said, and I allow for that. And why I love the cloud is because I don't totally rely on it. And that's the thing. The people who talk up the cloud, as you say, often it's coming from the US, where their networks might be better than ours. But I love the cloud because it's one more tool in my arsenal, and I love the cloud because I don't trust it. I love the cloud because it's a great place to keep my photos as another copy. It's a great place to work, but I make sure I've always got offline copies. So it's a great tool in the arsenal. I love that I can put a lot of stuff there, and I know that it's there. As you say, if something happens to my computer, if something happens to my house, it's probably the collaborative bit of the cloud that I really love the most. The ability to work with other freelancers and editors and edit documents on the go while we're maybe talking over Skype or talking over the phone. We're looking at stuff, we're Dropboxing stuff, it's all just happening. That kind of collaboration stuff I love, but only because I don't totally rely on it. So the reason why you would hate the cloud is if you want to use the cloud as, God intended to be the only thing. If you're smart and you don't actually trust the cloud, then you can find it's actually pretty good.
So you love it, but it's an abusive relationship in essence.
Yeah, pretty much. It's an unhealthy relationship with the cloud, and I think that is the best. Have a good time with the cloud, but don't trust it.
And that just about wraps it up for this episode of Vertical Hold.
Thanks for joining us for another chat, and we'll see you again in a fortnight.